My ex-wife cheated on me 15 years ago and now she's paralyzed. But my kids expect me to take care of her. Before we dive in, just a small favor. If you like stories filled with drama, twists, and real emotion, hit that subscribe button and support the channel. That way, you'll never miss out on content that keeps you hooked. When I refused, they turned on me. Now I've cut them off. I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe to vent or maybe to make some sense of what has happened. I don't expect much sympathy, especially since family situations like mine tend to divide opinions. But I figure sharing this here might help me deal with my anger and frustration. I divorced my ex-wife 15 years ago after discovering she had been cheating on me for 2 years with her friend. We have 3 children together. For the sake of privacy, let's call them Sarah, Jake, and Emily. It was devastating when I found out about the affair. I'd always prided myself on being a good husband and father. I wasn't perfect by any means. We were financially tight, but I was dedicated to my family. Ex-wife was a stay-at-home mom raising 3 children while I worked 2 jobs to provide for them. I thought it was a fair setup for both of us, but sadly she didn't think so. She had a complaint that I didn't give them enough time and also that I didn't make enough money. I lived in this guilt for many years, believing I was incompetent in both aspects until I realized that I was in my late 20s and early 30s at that time and providing for a family of 5 wasn't a cakewalk. I was actually doing great considering my decent background. I didn't come from a wealthy family. Whatever we had, it was out of my sweat and blood. Our marriage got cold and one fine day I caught her cheating with her friend and I called it quits. The affair didn't just hurt me, it felt like a betrayal of the life we had built together. It wasn't just some one-time mistake or poor judgment. It was a 2-year-long secret life she had with her friend. The emotional, financial, and psychological toll of finding out that your partner had been unfaithful for such a long period is hard to describe. It's like your entire world gets pulled out from under you. After finding out, I confronted her. She admitted to it, but was more defensive than apologetic, as if I had somehow driven her to do it. It was like I didn't even recognize the woman I had married. There was no reconciliation attempt, no counseling, nothing. I filed for divorce almost immediately and surprisingly, she didn't fight it. I think she was too caught up in the fantasy of her life with the affair partner to care. That dream of hers didn't last long. About 6 months later, the affair partner dumped her, leaving her single and in many ways broken. She tried to come back to me, but by then I was already emotionally checked out. She shattered my trust and there was no way I could go back. I focused on co-parenting our kids and trying to rebuild my life. After the divorce, I made a point to stay involved in my children's lives. I loved them and didn't want the divorce to ruin their relationship with either of their parents. We had joint custody and I paid child support until they were old enough to be on their own. I also contributed to their college tuition, took them on vacations, and supported them in every way I could. They stayed with me on weekends and holidays and I felt like we had a decent co-parenting arrangement. The children and I grew close and despite the bitterness with their mother, I was hopeful that at least the kids wouldn't have to bear the brunt of the divorce. About 5 years after the divorce, I met my current wife. She's amazing, kind, supportive, and a fantastic mother. We have 2 kids together who are in elementary school. My marriage has been stable and happy. Of course, balancing the new family with my responsibilities to my older children was difficult at times, but I thought I was managing it as best I could. Life moved on, but now it's all coming to a head in ways I never anticipated. My ex remains single. She was dating here and there, but nothing serious as I heard from the children. However, a year ago, she suddenly collapsed at her workplace and was rushed to the hospital. Since then, she has been unwell, but I didn't really pay much attention. We had zero communication outside of matters related to the kids, and even that became less frequent once they hit their late teens and early 20s. She was diagnosed with a heart problem, but it wasn't that severe. She was discharged within a week and was on medication. Then earlier this year, everything changed. I got a call from my eldest daughter, Sarah, telling me that my ex-wife had been hospitalized after suffering a stroke. She was paralyzed from the waist down, and they weren't sure if she'd ever fully recover. I felt pity for my children. After all, she was their mother. I visited her with my current wife, and honestly, she looked miserable when I discovered her cheating. I did curse her, but I never wanted her to suffer this badly. I prayed for her recovery for the sake of the children. Sarah told me they needed help. Financial help, to be specific. Apparently my ex-wife's medical bills were piling up and she couldn't afford to cover them through her insurance plans or savings. I immediately wrote a check, a sizable chunk of cash that covered a huge portion of her immediate medical bills. Thankfully, she was recovering fast and was soon discharged from the hospital and put on physio to help her regain muscle strength. However, she was still far from leading a normal life. She needed someone to help her with her basic routine, as basic as taking her to the loo or giving her a shower. For the first 3 months, the children took turns taking care of their mother, but now they're overwhelmed. They have their own lives, jobs, and responsibilities. The eldest one, Sarah, got married last year, and due to her mother's condition, she isn't able to give time to her marriage. Jake has just started his career and needs to focus on his work, but he's just able to do the bare minimum to keep the job. The youngest one, Emily, graduated a few months back and couldn't take up a full-time job because of this responsibility. She's doing part-time jobs to make ends meet. Ex-wife doesn't have money to hire a full-time nurse, and neither do the children have enough money to contribute and get a nurse for their mother. Their situation is genuine. I agree and I empathize, but what do I do about it? I have lent out substantial chunks of money 3 times since she got paralyzed. I have my own family to think about now, 2 school-going children who depend on me for the next 10 years, a wife, and our own set of financial responsibilities. Despite this, I told them I would pitch in financially whenever I could, but I cannot commit to any specific amount. My children are not happy about it. They want me to fully take responsibility for my ex-wife since she's their mother. I denied it and they all sort of got bitter. They stopped responding to my calls and texts and reply sarcastically whenever I put something on my social media posts with my wife and kids. I tried to be empathetic to them since they are all going through tough times taking care of their mom while juggling the responsibilities of their lives. But it seems like they have no empathy for my situation and feel entitled to my money. I took their bitter comments until I could, but yesterday I had had enough and I snapped back at Jake, who called me whining about the situation and blaming me for not taking enough responsibility. I said I had already paid my dues. I raised you guys, supported all 3 of you financially, paid for your education, and fulfilled every legal and moral obligation I had as a father. But your mother? No, we have been divorced for 15 years. I'm not responsible for her anymore. She had her chance. She made her choices, and she should deal with the consequences of those choices. That's how I see it. He hung up the call without saying anything. Now I'm just feeling overwhelmed. While I understand their dilemma, I'm also not in a situation to fully cover my ex-wife. Do you guys think I'm cruel for prioritizing my current family over my ex-wife? When I refused, they turned on me. Now I've cut them off. Update 1: I thought my assertiveness was the end of the discussion, but it wasn't. I tell you guys, no one can act more entitled than your children. And the fun part is they get away with it because you birthed them. Before moving to the update, let me answer a common question I got on my last "What's my ex-wife's take on this?" Well guys, I don't know. I'm not in touch with her. I visited her twice when she was in the hospital. That too with my wife. At that time, she wasn't in a condition to talk. Whatever info I have, it's through my children. Also, I don't care to ask them what their mother wants from me. It's futile. I hope I'm clear. Coming to the update after the blowout with Jake, he gathered his sisters and came to my house. He wasn't bitter about our conversation, but had other demands for me. They started with a whining session about how difficult it was for them to manage their finances and their ailing mother, etc. I immediately understood where this was leading, but I was wrong. Their demand surpassed my imagination. I didn't want to interrupt and be rude, so I let them continue. Their concerns were actually genuine. After they were done, I politely said I had a lot of responsibilities to take care of, and amidst this, I could not commit any further financial help. Emily intervened and said, "Dad, we 3 have kind of paused our lives to take care of our mother, but it's becoming too much for us. We're hoping you could become the primary caregiver for her." I freaked out and asked, "What do you mean by primary caregiver?" Sarah pitched in to say, "Dad, now you're financially stable and work 1 job. You can easily share our load on weekends and evenings to take care of mom, so that we 3 get some time off to prioritize our lives." I lost my mind but didn't raise my voice. I stared at them dumbfounded. I mean, how could they even suggest such a thing? That I leave my wife and children and nurse their mother on my time off? I explained that while I empathized with their mother's situation, it wasn't my responsibility anymore. We had been divorced for over a decade and a half, and I had moved on with my life. I told them they could help their mother if they wanted, but I wasn't going to be involved beyond the help I had already provided. Sarah started sobbing and Emily hugged her. They were upset that I wasn't willing to do more if the expectation of taking over the financial responsibility for my ex-wife wasn't enough. They even wanted me to step in and be her primary caregiver. What BS. They don't realize I have a full-time job, a wife, and 2 young kids. I tried reasoning with them, but their point was they didn't have the time or resources to care for their mother, so they expected me to step up. In their minds, I was still responsible because I was once married to her. I felt they were trying to dump their mother on my shoulders. I sat there feeling defeated. The silence was tense while I just looked at them, hoping hoping they would realize how dumb they sounded. Jake broke the silence and said, "Come on, dude, you cannot shy away from your responsibilities. She's your wife after all." I snapped at him and corrected, "Ex-wife who destroyed our marriage." I wanted to say more, but I stopped right there. I didn't want to sound like I was vindictive or not helping her out of spite. They didn't take it well. In fact, they ganged up on me. All three of them accused me of abandoning their mother. They said I was being heartless and selfish for choosing my new family over them. The discussion went on round and round without any conclusion. I was done explaining myself, but it fell on deaf ears. Things escalated when my current wife found out what was going on. She had been incredibly supportive of me, lending a few grand to my ex-wife once in a while. Because of her miserable condition, my wife usually keeps her distance from any dispute between me and my children. But when she realized they were essentially trying to bully me into taking care of my ex-wife, she stepped in. She asked me, "What's the matter? Even after hours of discussion, you still can't come to a conclusion?" I know she heard everything. She was in her room all this time, which was next to the living room where we were having all the talks. This question was her way of seeking my approval to meddle in the situation. I looked at her with puppy eyes and gave her the brief that the children were overwhelmed, juggling responsibilities, and wanted me to be the primary caregiver. She smiled, empathized with them, and said in a firm voice, "We understand your guys, but your dad has already done his part for you all and your mother. Now he has other pending obligations toward us and our kids. You all are adults, and we hope you have the maturity to understand his situation." These weren't her exact words, but more or less the same. My kids got furious and asked her not to interfere in this matter. Before I could respond, my wife snapped at them, saying I have every right to interfere because every penny he gives to your mother is going out from my household. We could have enrolled our kids in swimming lessons with that money. We could have funded their summer camp. We could have done so many useful things. Yet I let him part with that money out of sheer humanity. But now I see you all are exploiting him financially and emotionally, and I need to stand by him. They didn't take this well and accused my wife of manipulating me and turning me against them. Emily said she was the reason I wasn't willing to help. I was shocked at how vicious they were toward her. This is a woman who has done nothing but support me and been a wonderful stepmother to them. And yet they turned on her as if she were some evil stepmother from a fairy tale. That was the final straw. I told all three of them that I wasn't going to tolerate any disrespect toward my wife. I drew a line in the sand. I told them that if they couldn't be civil and stop trying to guilt me into taking care of their mother, then I would have no choice but to cut them off. They didn't believe me at first, but when they continued to gang up on my wife and me, I followed through on my word. I asked them to leave my house immediately. I have no space for people who disrespect my wife. It was shocking for them that I could do such a thing to them because until now I've only been loving to them. But I cut them off. All three of them. I'm not going to lie. Cutting off my children was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I love them and I always will. But I couldn't stand by and let them attack my wife and guilt trip me. They cannot force me into a situation I didn't want any part of. It hurt, but I felt like I had no choice. It's been a few days since I cut them off and the silence is painful. I've been second-guessing myself, constantly wondering if I made the right decision, if there was a better way to handle things. But every time I replay the events in my mind, I come to the same. I did what I had to do to protect my current family and my own mental health. I don't know if my children will ever come around. I hope they do. I hope they can see things from my perspective one day. But I'm not holding my breath. For now, I'm focusing on my wife and my younger kids. They need me and I need them. Update 2: my children reached out to me not to mend the fence, but to further exploit me. That's right, I was no contact with all three of them after the last discussion. It was after 3 months that Sarah texted me on my birthday. I replied with an emoticon. Since then, she's been texting me on and off, checking on me. Initially, I ignored quite a few of her messages. Then she apologized for being rude to my wife. I didn't say anything on that topic, but after that, I sometimes reply to her. She also doesn't talk about her mother, and neither do I ask. I just sent her single-word replies to texts. My wife knows about it, and she's fine with it. Also, Sarah is the most emotional and caring of the three, and she didn't say anything wrong to my wife. It was mostly Jake and Emily, but Sarah didn't stop them either and stood with them. So I had to cut her off too. Then a week ago, she texted me asking for a meetup. Not alone, but with Jake and Emily. I said they need to apologize to my wife before I would let them in. She agreed. My wife suggested we meet outside so that if there's any drama we can just walk out. Having it in the house becomes complicated. To ask them to leave. It made sense, and we fixed the meeting at a restaurant. All three of them arrived. They apologized to my wife and things seemed normal. They were just filling us in on their life updates minus the stuff about their mother. After a while, I noticed Emily gesturing something to Sarah through her eyes. Sarah ignored her and so did I. Then a few minutes later, Jake nudged Sarah with his elbow. It was so evident that my wife and I both noticed. My wife assertively asked them, "What's the matter?" And it got awkward. Sarah fumbled to speak, but Emily, being the big mouth, started speaking. Let me quote loosely what she did. "We were hoping to get some financial help from you. We understand it was too much to ask you to be the caregiver. It was our blunder, but financially I guess you can pitch in. We can no longer pause our lives to care for mom. We need a full-time nurse and we really cannot afford it. We wanted you to bear the expense of the nurse." She went on and on describing how the three are struggling to provide for their mother. But in my head, I was connecting the dots. You see, ever since I cut them off, I didn't pay a penny toward their mother. Now they realize that by demanding my time, they were ripped off from the money as well. So their apology meant nothing. It was just a facade to manipulate me into giving them money. I said, "Sorry, but I cannot lend you money anymore. I'm not a billionaire who could take care of so many people with my two hands. I have a normal job and a lot of responsibilities to handle. I'm still paying off the loan I took for Jake and Emily's college tuition." Jake revolted. "Since I'm not giving my time to their mother, I should at least bear the charges for the nurse." I wanted to walk out at this point, but I didn't want to leave the discussion hanging. I reiterated my stand, and an argument broke out between me and Jake. Sarah pitched in to mediate the situation. She calmly said, "But Dad, you committed to helping financially and you used to lend money before our last meeting. So what happened now?" I replied in the same calm, "Honey, first of all, I never committed. In fact, I said I cannot commit, but I would pitch in whenever feasible. Now I don't think it's a viable option for me. You guys cannot feel entitled to a handout, right?" They all fell silent and looked bitter. I repeated myself one last time, saying my obligations toward their mother had ended and now I have my new family to take care of. None of them said anything. I called for the check, paid the bill, and left. They didn't even say goodbye to us. They just sat there scrolling through their phones. My wife and I were silent during the ride back home. Both of us knew I made the right decision. It hurts to see my children in pain. Their situation is understandable. No one wants to see their parents suffering, but there's nothing I can help with. They need to learn that I'm not their safety net anymore, and it's time for them to take responsibility for their own lives. It's hard, but necessary for my peace of mind. Hopefully, with time, they'll come to understand my perspective and realize how much I've already done for them and their mother. It's just a shame that the conversation ended on such a bitter note. But it sounds like my wife and I are on the same page, and that's what really matters.